Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Monday, February 1st. Man, oh man, we have already cruised through the month of January. We are chugging right along here. February has come, the month of spring training, the month of pitchers and catchers. Baseball season is just a few short weeks away. Although I will put an asterisk at the end of that sentence, because in segment number 2, we're going to get into the latest in regards to the 2021 season and what's going on, what's taking place. But before we get into all of that, talk about all the signings that have happened across Major League Baseball. Here in segment number 1, we are getting into the big news of the weekend. There was a trade, another large individual, a large personality, one of the best in the game, has been traded this weekend, and it certainly changed the landscape of the National League here moving forward. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Let's jump right on in to today's episode. And of course, the person I'm referencing here right off the top of the show is Nolan Arenado of the Colorado Rockies. It has been reported, nothing is yet finalized, but it has been reported that the Rockies and Cardinals have come to terms on an agreement that would ship Nolan Arenado from Colorado over to St. Louis. The return price back to Colorado is still to be determined. We've heard rumors of up to 5 names potentially being discussed and involved in the trade talks, and I'll give you guys those names here in a second. But first off, Nolan Arenado is potentially 5 to 10 years away from being the best third baseman in the history of baseball. And I don't think that is an outlandish statement. There's probably some of you guys listening right now going, whoa. What about Michael Jack Schmidt? What about him? What about him? It's like, hey, Arenado's on his path here, man. I know he's only been in the league for 8 years, but you look at this guy's statistics, his defensive metrics, and this guy is already putting together a Hall of Fame career if he hung it up in a year or two. So if he continues on this pace for another 5, 7, 9 years, as the guy here is just into his 30s, I believe, not even that old. I'm trying to find, let's see here, date of birth, not on the website I have, but the guy certainly has 5 or 7 good years left in him and could go down as the best third baseman to ever play, because for all 8 years that he's played, he's won the Gold Glove at third base. And I don't know how many highlights you got to see of this guy flashing the leather down there in the hot corner, but holy man, my goodness, as a third baseman at the Division I level in college, I can appreciate and I can understand the difficulty it takes to play that position. The saying in baseball is that there are outfielders, there are infielders, and then there are third basemen, because that hot corner coming at you, that ball is ripped down the line. You don't have a lot of time to react, engage. It's the longest throw across the diamond. And this guy, 2013 through 2020, Gold Glove winner each of those 8 seasons. 5 out of the 8 seasons, he's been a Silver Slugger. 5 out of the 8 seasons, he's finished top 8 in MVP voting. Last year, he had a bit of a down year, only hitting .253, but in every other year, this guy, oh my gosh, is he impressive. And he was arguably the best guy available on the market. Yes, I know Francisco Lindor was traded earlier this offseason, but I would argue with you that Arenado was a bigger fish, and this is a heck of a move made by the St. Louis Cardinals, and just a clear sign and really a conclusion to the saga that has been Arenado. out there with the Rockies, because it was only about 3 years ago the Rockies were in the playoffs. They signed Arenado to a record-setting contract, promising him that they would be going for it, putting together a competitive team year in and year out. And we've seen, based on their actions and the outcomes over the past 2 seasons, that this isn't the case, and this team is clearly going into rebuild mode, which obviously rubbed Nolan the wrong way. He asked to get out of town, but, he has a large contract, no trade clause, so there were very much a few issues going on there. But here I'm just seeing on Baseball Reference, he's also a 4-time Platinum Glove award winner. And for those of you who don't know what a Platinum Glove is, I believe it's the best of the Gold Glovers. So 4 out of the 8 years he's been in the league, he's been recognized as the best defenseman, period, in regards to the National League. So let's talk a little bit about that contract. That was a bit of a sticking point. Well, there are 6 years and $199 million left on that deal. And the reason that this trade has not been finalized and is still being quote-unquote reported is because that Colorado has been willing to send $50 million to the St. Louis Cardinals to help out with the rest of that contract. And when money of that value goes from one side to the other, that deal then needs approval from the commissioner's office and from the Players Association. So both sides involved, not just, hey, parties, we're shipping this guy out for a player to be named later, but, hey, we're sending you and a ton of cash over here. That's when approvals need to be had from higher-ups in the league. So there have been reports, again, it's a bit complicated when it comes to the contract, but it seems as if Arenado is going to get an extra year guaranteed on his deal. May go from 6 years left to 7 years left, adding an additional $15 million onto the end of that deal. So he's going to get about 7 years now of commitment to the St. Louis Cardinals. There is also reports that Arenado will be deferring money off of the contract. He will be restructuring the entirety of the deal, which essentially says, hey, if I got 7 years, $200 million left, we'll put $150 in these contracts, and then the final $50 you'll pay me in $2 million increments for the next 25 years after I retire, or whatever he seems fit within that mold to continue to get paid potentially beyond his retirement, a la Bobby Bonilla Day that we celebrate every year. So there are, not finalized in regards to numbers, years, millions, all of that good stuff, but more and more details are becoming available here by the day. There's also a couple of opt-out clauses that are being looked at because as of right now, Arenado still has an opt-out available to him after the 2021 season. And if you're the Cardinals and you're not 100% sure that he's going to be sticking around after a year, I don't think you're going to give up a package of 3 to 5 potential players coming back towards Colorado. So you would think that the extension, the discussion, the deferred money, the opt-outs, maybe they get moved to 2023 and 5 or 4 and 6 and kind of look at it in that light. But again, these are conversations that I'm sure are being had. Everybody is talking right now in regards to anonymous sources because they're not able to discuss these types of details until stuff becomes official. But we're, again, seeing those people involved. Bob Nightingale, Jeff Passan, everybody kind of sharing the details that they are being sold here on a day-to-day basis. So I do anticipate this will get approved. I believe that the players, as well as the league, will benefit from this type of move from Arenado, get him to a contending team, allow him to play in a bigger market, a better baseball market. Nothing against Denver and the Colorado Rockies, but of course just the history in St. Louis, the Redbirds, the fact that they are postseason stalwart more often than not is something here that I think, again, the game of baseball will greatly benefit from when it comes to revenue, jersey sales, ticket sales, all of that particular stuff that, goes kind of under the wire there. So what's the potential return headed the other way? Now, again, we don't know for sure, but I have heard up to 5 different names mentioned. I would be surprised if all 5 are ultimately finalized, but with $50 million coming over as well, that could buy you a contract or two or a prospect or two coming back your way if you're a Rockies fan. So the 5 names here that I've heard, the first one is Austin Gomber. He is a major league level player, a left-handed pitcher, 27 years old. He pitched for St. Louis in 2018 and then again in 2020. This past year, he was 1-1 with a 1.86 ERA. He was kind of a swingman for the Cardinals. 14 total appearances, 4 games started, 30 innings on the year. So left-handed starter, long reliever, certainly somebody that could benefit, or the Rockies could benefit from having on their particular roster, whether they use him as an opener or come in after the opener. A lot of different potential areas for Gomber to be used. Next on the list, we have Jake Woodford, a right-handed pitcher at the major league level, made his debut this past season in 2020. 24-year-old right-hander went 1-0, 12 games. He only had 1 start, so a bullpen arm to go along with Gomber. He had a 5.57 ERA, but, those are 2 major league level talents that the Rockies would be acquiring, both in the rotation and, of course, playing in Denver, playing in Mile High Stadium, out there, Coors Field. The ball flies, and the more pitching you have, the better in order to kind of benefit and improve there moving forward. And the final 3 names we have here are all minor league level talents. They range from AAA down to AA and even, below that, rookie ball type of levels. The first one is John Torres. He played at the AAA level as recently as 2019. Again, there were no 2020 stats to go off of for these minor league level guys. But Torres is an outfielder. Let's see here. 2019, he played, he got a cup of coffee at the AAA level. So he is rookie level. High A ball is particularly where he's at. He hit 242 back in 2019, but only 20 years old, certainly has a lot of upside when it comes to that level. Next, we have Lucan Baker, a first baseman in the Cardinals organization. He is 23 years old. He found himself at the high A level in 2019. He hit 244 with 10 home runs and 53 RBIs. So those 2 guys both kind of at the high A, double A type of level. And then the last one is Angel Rendon, who is a pitcher, a 23-year-old. And again, in 2019, he had advanced all the way to double A, where he was 6-6 with a 3.21 ERA in 20 starts, 115 innings at that level. So basically, they get themselves, if all 5 are going back to Colorado, you get yourself a starter/swingman from the left side who was solid, a right-handed reliever who made his major league debut. Then you get 2 kind of lottery tickets at the single-A level and a double-A arm who, again, in 20 starts had an ERA in the mid-3s and certainly could find himself, you think, last year with development, AAA, potentially on the cusp of making the major league level and making a difference here. So a fascinating trade. Again, none of that is for sure. Those are all kind of rumors of, hey, these are the names we are hearing. Will it be 3 of the 5, 4 of the 5, all 5? We don't know quite yet, but those are the names potentially being involved going back to Colorado. So what does this mean for the Rockies, big picture? What does it mean for the Cardinals, as well as kind of Major League Baseball as a whole? And I mean, first and foremost, this has to make the Cardinals the team to beat in the NL Central. I've mentioned it a couple of times here in the past couple of weeks that nobody really seems to want this division, and the Cubs are trading away a lot of people. The Reds are trading away / making cash cuts. The Brewers, Josh Hader is on the market, their top reliever, and the Cardinals just hadn't made a move. Well, now they make a move to bring in Arenado. They also signed Adam Wainwright, which we'll talk about coming up in segment number 3 in a little bit more detail here, but certainly puts the Cardinals as the team to beat at the top of the NL Central, and them being a playoff team last year makes them the favorite here, I would think, for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on how the development of the other teams in that division happen. But I think Arenado is that big of a difference maker that puts them right up there at the top. And when it comes to the Colorado Rockies, does this mean that this rebuild is just beginning? You know, another name on the trade list that everybody was considering is Trevor Story. Do they now move on from Trevor Story? Is this one where, hey, Arenado's gone, Story's the only other guy who could potentially bring back a ton of prospects? We've talked about the shortstop class of next year, where they could potentially use some of this money that they've now freed up to sign one of these guys to come along with the kids. But, I mean, they're not going to contend here in 2021. So for Story to play out his last year, it certainly seems, if it's not this offseason, he could be a mid-season acquisition for a team making a playoff push. And other teams around the league in the National League, I mean, the Cubs, you now kind of look at the Cardinals as really superior. So does this kind of, push them to move on Chris Bryant, move on Javier Baez, Anthony Rizzo, or is this one where they take a couple of months early in the year, see how things are starting to play out? Again, I thought they could fade a little bit last year, but made a nice push to, towards the playoffs. So if they don't start hot, could they move some of these guys? I do believe that will be the case. So I think Chris Bryant and Trevor Story could be two mid-season pickups to really make a difference for teams looking to take that next step. So, National League playoff teams, they're pretty clear right now. Yeah, out west, you got the Dodgers and the Padres, clearly the best two teams. In the Central now, you have the Cardinals. I don't think anybody else will be in wild card consideration. And then in the National League East, the Phillies, the Marlins, the Nationals, the Braves, the Mets, all of those teams very, very good on paper and could potentially make a push. But Nolan Arenado traded reportedly from the Rockies to the Cardinals in what has become a fascinating offseason here in the last couple of weeks as that hot stove has really picked up. So I think it's a great move for the Cardinals, especially if they can lock in his deal, make sure that opt-out disappears, and the Rockies make it known that, hey, yes, we are rebuilding, and we're kind of going the mode of the Pirates to take in a ton of prospects and look at the window saying, hey, the next 2 to 3 years are not for us. But after that, we're going to come in with that next wave. So that'll do it here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll step aside here now for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. But when we come back, I'm going to get you guys up to date on the latest proposal from Major League Baseball to the MLB Players Association in regards to the 2021 season. Are we going to start on time? Stick around. Find out.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend out there. If you haven't rated and reviewed the podcast, please do so. I appreciate you guys wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher, Alexa now has some podcasts. Say, hey, Alexa, play the GSMC Baseball Podcast, and we should pop up and be available for you guys. So wherever you're doing this, if you're currently on your phone, if you're scrolling away here, like, rate, and review the podcast. Leave a comment. I'll read them here on the show. That goes a long way in continuing to help us grow and spread the love here. So if you haven't checked out the other podcasts within the GSMC Podcast Network, check those out too. While you're rating and reviewing, hit that magnifying glass down at the bottom of the screen Just type in GSMC, and you'll see 15, 20, 25 different podcasts popping up for you. So whatever you're into, whether it's health and fitness, books, movies, or it's other sports, we have the Super Bowl coming up here this coming Sunday. College sports coming at you fast and furious. The 2021 college football season starting to be released. There's a lot going on. So make sure you guys check out those other podcasts, and I think you guys would enjoy that content there as well. So jumping in here now to segment number 2, what are we talking about? What are we discussing? Well, over the weekend, there was a most updated proposal sent from Major League Baseball over to the Players Association in regards to what is taking place for the 2021 season. And as we've known now for a couple of weeks, that the owners and commissioner, Rob Manfred, I'll call him Bobby Manfred, he wants to push back the start of the season due to the coronavirus, due to health concerns, due to the pandemic, and the players don't seem to be buying into what Bobby is selling here currently at this particular time. So some of the details that have been released, and again, it is assumed that the players are going to decline this proposal. Nothing here has been set for sure, but as of Monday, if you're listening to this, or Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever it is reported that the players will be declining this report, and it was a quote-unquote tactic to give this proposal this close to spring training, and the players are not happy as talks continue to be a little tight, a little heated, so to speak here. So what does Major League Baseball want to do here? They want to push back the start of the season 1 month. Right now, spring training is scheduled to start on February 17th. They're going to push back that start date to March 22nd, and thus, in turn, push back the start of the regular season from the end of March, early April, all the way back to April 28th. And what does this do to the schedule? Well, why would they push it back here? Well, they want to play 154 games as opposed to 162, and they want to do so in 166 days. So 154 games in 166 days, which means you're going to have a handful of doubleheaders, most likely 7-inning doubleheaders, like we saw here during the 2020 season. Again, that is not confirmed, but that is an assumption, I believe, would certainly make sense. But the standard regular season is 162 games in 186 days. So guys would go from 24 off days, there's my good quick math on the fly, all the way down to just 12 off days in 5 months. And it has been reported that players have some concerns when it comes to health and safety regarding performance, not regarding the pandemic, coronavirus, but just playing that many games with that few off days. And certainly I see that as a concern because more or less right now you're looking again at 24 over 24 weeks divided by 4. That's about 6 months, which is basically the length of the season. So during a normal season, they get about 1 off day a week. I mean, yes, that's not, 100% accurate. They'll play 10 days in a row, a couple of off days, that type of thing. But, only having 12 off days in 5 months, that gives you 2 off days a month type of thing. So you're getting 1 off day every other week. So instead of 7 days in a row, you're going to be playing 14, which, again, lends to probably guys getting more off days, resting a bit more during game days, which means teams with deeper rosters would benefit most likely from this agreement, and players are just not happy about that particular style of, you're worried about the coronavirus. Well, what about our actual health and safety just from playing a physically demanding sport moving forward? So I do think that is too many games and not enough days. Like I said, I know doubleheaders will most likely be involved, but that would certainly concern me as a player, so I would see why they're not happy with that. It is stated in the proposal, however, that players would get paid for all 162 games, which is obviously the number one sticking point when it comes to players. They want to be compensated for 100% of games, whether they don't play the season in its entirety or not. And it does look like owners have recognized that and are willing to pay that particular compensation. So that's kind of an olive branch for the owners to say, hey, we're going to play 154, but we'll pay you like we're playing 162. But all the other kind of secondary information doesn't look like it's up to the player standards. So 154 games, it would expand the postseason from 10 teams to 14 teams, similar to 2020, 7 in each league, which again, the number 1 team would receive a bye for the opening round. The other 6 would play to get to 3-4-2. It's what the National Football League did this past season, and I think it was certainly beneficial for them. I was a big fan of the 3 playoff games each day on Wild Card Weekend, so I would certainly enjoy an expanded postseason. And as a Phillies fan, I believe that would give us a much better opportunity to reach the postseason. But the compensation when it comes to the postseason is something that is certainly going to be continued to be negotiated, because it is reported in this proposal that the players will collect 60% of gate revenue for the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. And this is an uptick from years past. I mean, again, they don't know how many fans are going to be allowed in. There's continued concerns around the variant strain of the coronavirus, and will they have enough vaccinated by then? Will they only allow 10,000 people in? So how much money is 60% actually going to be? And if they renegotiate this in years, future, is it going to stay at that level once they know they could sell out every game? And then they would be guaranteed $80 million for the remainder of the postseason, which essentially would be 2 additional rounds, the NLCS, the ALCS, as well as the World Series. But this $80 million would match the agreement for the 2020 season. Once again, kind of referencing last year in regards to that agreement. So whether or not players were happy with that last year obviously dictates to whether or not they would be excited about that here potentially in 2021. So it could be fascinating in regards to postseason money. But a secondary conversation that happens when you go from 10 to 14 playoff teams, and both sides of the coin, I do understand of this conversation, and I myself, I'm kind of torn in regards to which way I believe this will play out. But with the expanded playoffs, from the ownership side of things, they think that this will make more teams want to spend money and pay players more because, again, more teams can make the playoffs. Hey, if I'm the Phillies, kind of on the outside looking in here, like I said, Dodgers, Padres, Cardinals in the East, Braves and Mets. Okay, maybe I don't make it. Maybe I don't spend some cash this year and save it for next year. Now there's 14 teams. Now there's an additional team. Yeah, I think we could beat the Nationals. I think we could beat the Marlins. So, let's go out and sign another player. Let's go spend some more money to try to make the push to the postseason due to the expansion. I certainly see that side, and as a fan, I believe that side and want that side to win and be true. But the player side of things and the skepticism within the expanded playoffs is the fact that players then think it will not incentivize owners to spend more because, hey, if I win 82 games, if I go 82-80, I'll make the postseason, just as if I went, 90-62 or 90-72, whatever it is. So they feel as if, okay, well, more teams get in. I don't have to spend as much money because I don't have to be as good to make the playoffs. And that's where I think it gets into a bit of a tiered conversation. I mean, the top tier teams, the Braves, the Dodgers, the Padres, they have World Series aspirations, not so much playoff aspirations, but the Mets, the Nationals, who think they could pencil themselves in, probably aren't going to take that extra, guy here for $10 million. And that third tier of teams, like the Marlins, the Phillies, last year it was the Reds, who are right around 500 based on, what the roster's saying on paper, maybe a move or two away. Those are the guys willing to sign that extra player. But again, that player isn't a top dollar player. It's going to be a $5 to $10 million a year starter or $5 to $10 million a year reliever. So it will be kind of fascinating to see if in expanded playoffs, leads to more spending from ownership? And then if it does, what type of talent level on those teams is doing the spending? Because if I'm the Phillies and they expand the postseason, I'm thinking, man, okay, now we are going to go get a starter because our chances to make the postseason just dramatically increased, as opposed to being the Mets going, yeah, I think we'll make the playoffs, but I'm trying to win the National League. Now I need to go spend some more money here to move forward. So it's a fascinating conversation that I don't know if I have the answer to, but that's where the owners are saying, hey, it's going to make them spend more money. And the players are saying, nah, I'm not buying that. I'm not so sure. The last little proposal here is, of course, the universal DH. We talked about that on last week's episode a bit. The owners see that as very much, hey, this is a player's win. We're giving this to you guys. This is one of the ones you want. Hey, we're doing you a favor. And the players push back on the fact that they say, hey, it's half the team. So, yes, it's a job, but it's only for about 15 players that have a job. And then from an ownership perspective, they don't value this position at the type of level that the compensation we are looking for follows. I mean, this is a $6, $10, $12 million position, so you're adding 15 guys at $10 million. Okay, you're giving out $150 million in player salaries that wouldn't have been there, year in and year out. That's not enough for us to say, okay, thank you for giving us this victory. Now we're going to give you X, Y, and Z for whatever you want. So again, is 60% of the gate revenue compared to $150 million. What is that give and take? And ultimately, where does that stand in regards to the negotiations? So again, it has been reported that this will be declined by the players, but the owners do stay steadfast in the fact that they are looking to push back the start of the season. And like I said, the coronavirus is basically behind this because Arizona has the highest case rate in the United States here as of the end of the month of January, and it is about double the cases from July of last year when the year started, and they played those 60 games. So, the owners have a concern whether or not they can get through this year safely, whether or not outbreaks like the Marlins or the Cardinals will take place, and, things will become a bit of a circus once again. And then the players counter with basically stating, hey, the NFL played an entire season and didn't have to cancel any games. Yes, they had to reschedule games. They played on Tuesday, Wednesday, Monday, basically played every day of the week, but they didn't have to cancel any games. They also stated that the NHL is back and playing, the NBA is back and playing, and even college sports were able to play this past season. And that's where the owners come back with, yeah, the NHL shortened their season by about a third of the games. The NBA shortened their season by about a third of the games. So, you guys need to be realistic and look at this and be able to, have that self-awareness that everybody else is kind of shortening the season and pushing things back. And with the continued distribution of vaccines continuing to be rolled out, the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine potentially getting approved here in the next month or so, the commissioner's office, local government officials in Arizona have suggested pushing back the year or the start of the season for a month, and that's kind of the crux of this proposal. But it has been reported that it will be turned down by the Players Association, and they're looking to continue to trek forward in regards to a normal season, normal timing, normal scheduling, and they have proven last year, and other sports have proven, like football, that you can indeed play a season in this pandemic and still keep the players and the fans and everybody involved safe while doing so. But it'll be fascinating to see if there's an agreement put in place in the next 3 weeks, because like I said, February 17th, 2.5 weeks from now, people are supposed to be reporting to Arizona and to Florida for the start of the 2021 season. But that'll do it for the latest negotiation talks. I really, really hope I don't have to have those types of conversations with you guys episode after episode like I did last year at about March, April, May, kind of having those talks here. I'd much rather want to talk about spring training, who's looking good, who's not, who's signing where, and all of that good stuff. But that's what we'll do here in the upcoming third segment, get you guys up to date on all the other signings signings across Major League Baseball, touch on some rumors here by the end of the show. Trevor Bauer still out there. Is he going to sign anytime soon? But we're going to step aside here for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. But when we come back, keep you guys up to date on all the signings. So stick around, everybody. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Again, and thanks for listening to the third segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there here Sunday, Monday, Tuesday up in the Northeast here outside of Philadelphia. We're staring at about a foot of snow. I mean, we've only had one snowstorm yet this year in December where I had to shovel, but looking outside now, we're in the course of 3 to 5. Tomorrow's 5 to 8. The day after, 3 to 5 again. And I know the rest of the Northeast is getting pummeled up as well. And as you go further north, up to Massachusetts, New York, all that good stuff up there, you guys are going to get hammered as well. So if you're in D.C., Baltimore, Philly, New York, Boston, wherever in the Northeast corridor, hopefully you guys are making it out unscathed. Hopefully power continues where you're at. And if you're down south or out west on the West Coast, man, enjoy the weather where you're at, because I'm staring out the window here, watching the snow come down, just thinking to myself, dang, man, I got a shovel here at some point coming up soon. But do me a favor, if you guys haven't checked out us, on social media yet, do so for me. Social media, let's see, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, both the GSMC Baseball Podcast as well as the GSMC Podcast Network. I appreciate you guys. We'll keep you up to date on everything going on. Twitter, retweeting, LinkedIn, the Podcast Network will keep you up to date across the board. And then obviously us here within the Baseball Podcast, I'll let you guys know everything that's taking place out there. So here in segment number 3, we're going to talk about the recent signings that have come together over the past handful of days. There was a trade to discuss as well. And then we'll wrap up the episode doing all our best to keep you up to date with rumors, predictions, everything we see coming down the pipeline here between now and Wednesday. So what's happened? A couple of signings. We got about 10 more to discuss. Like I mentioned, things are starting to pick up here a little bit. But we talked about the Cardinals adding Nolan Arenado via trade. Those details still being worked out. But they did sign starting pitcher Adam Wainwright. Of course, he's been a stalwart in St. Louis the past decade and a half. I remember watching him all the way back to 2009 in the playoffs, beating the Phillies. They brought him back on a 1-year, $8 million deal, which was up from, I believe, the $5 million he got last year or the year prior. So they're running it back with Wainwright one more time. I do like that in the rotation. Of course, they got the kids coming up, Flaherty among them, and Wainwright's a fantastic veteran presence to continue to bring along that rotation. And if you're going to bring in Arenado, you might as well work to, finalize that pitching staff, because like I said, you're now the team to beat in the National League, and Wainwright knows it. So now he's saying, hey, come on, let's go. One more ride here. Myself and Yadier Molina does look like he's going to resign, but I'll fill you in on the rumor side of things with that one in a bit more detail here. A couple additional signings. Left-handed pitcher Carlos Rodon signed with the Chicago White Sox. A bit of a surprise there. He was brought in to compete for the 4th and 5th rotation spots. He's got a couple of guys, Kopech coming back off an injury and opting out. Cease, amongst others, Dylan Cease. And they got a handful of guys going for that 3, 4, 5 spot behind Keuchel and Lynn and Giolito, of course, being the top 3 guys. So number 4 and number 5 are open, and they got 3 or 4 guys here who are going to have to battle when it comes to spring training to see who ultimately wins those spots in the rotation. But that was a 1-year deal for $3 million, Rodon to the White Sox. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Phillies making another signing. Didi Gregorius at the shortstop position. I talked to you guys about them bringing back JT Realmuto on last week's podcast, and basically the Phillies are getting the band back together. And from an offensive perspective, it certainly makes a ton of sense. I mean, this was a team that was top 10 in Major League Baseball in runs scored during the 2020 season. The offense was not the reason as to their struggles and their under 500 finish. That was very much in the bullpen, the historically worst bullpen in baseball history, depending on what stats you're looking at, specifically earned run average, which, again, kind of important for baseball. But offensively, that was a very good ball club. And you bring JT back. Now you go to the shortstop spot. There was word that they were in on Simmons potentially, but he moved to the Twins and a couple of other moving parts. So it was really Didi or nobody of importance at the shortstop spot, which led to the Phillies having to go to that 2-year length. And again, I don't know if it's a great deal with the shortstop class next year, but certainly seems to think that they are not in on those big-time contracts for those shortstop guys. And the $28 million, $14 a year, is what he signed for last season during his 1-year deal, and he did have a bounce-back year offensively. So total, Didi and the Phillies come together on a 3-year, $42 million pact, $14 a year. They did not offer him the qualifying offer of $18.9 earlier this offseason, which now seems to be a solid maneuver on their part, because bringing him back for $14 a year, saving about $5 million if Didi were to accept. The only concern locally is his defense. The starting pitching staff has a very high ground ball rate when it comes to quality of outs with Wheeler, Nola, Eflin, very much ground ball strikeout guys. So Didi at shortstop, he's going to need to continue to prepare and show defensively that he can play at that spot. So the Phillies pretty much done offensively. Now looking to a bullpen piece, a starting pitcher, and potentially hitting the lottery on quite a few minor league deals they've brought in. They signed Ivan Nova, formerly of the Yankees, Pirates. They also signed left-handed pitcher Matt Moore to the Phillies. He got a 1-year, $3 million deal with incentives for them as well. And everybody remembers Matt Moore during his time in Tampa. He was very good from, I believe, 2016 to 2018. Then has dealt with some injuries last year, of course, with everything going on. But the Phillies looking for that lottery ticket or one of those minor league guys to come in and regain the form they've had in years past. And potentially they could have a rotation, because Spencer Howard, yes, top 50 prospect in all of baseball, but struggled during his first real action at the major league level. And then, of course, the Vince Velasquez. Oh, man, I don't want to watch him pitch anymore every 5th day, but he's got great stuff, and if he could ever figure it out, the guy could be very solid. But continuing around the signings here, we have outfielder Eddie Rosario found a home. He's going to stay in the American League Central. He signed with the Cleveland Indians for 1 year and $8 million. He was let go by the Minnesota Twins earlier this offseason, basically a cap casualty, to use a football term, more or less. Hey, they didn't want to pay him the contract he was at with the current economics and the pandemic. So he stays close to home from Minnesota to Cleveland. Very good offensive outfielder. He's been an all-star in years past. He's got a good, strong throwing arm, but getting a bit up there in age, which is why his market wasn't that 1-year kind of prove-it deal if you can bounce back. But Cleveland, they've made some moves, brought back Cesar Hernandez, which we talked about, and now adding Eddie Rosario, kind of continuing to stay competitive here and not going full rebuild when it comes to the AL Central. But looking up at the White Sox and the Twins, and what they have going on, I would certainly pencil them into that number 3 spot there in the division, even with the addition of Eddie Rosario. Another signing we have was outfielder Jock Peterson, formerly of the LA Dodgers. He signed with the Chicago Cubs on a 1-year, $7 million deal. And I had a few of my buddies reach out, and they were surprised that his market was not higher than that or for more term, longer term, 2-3 years. And when you do a little bit of research into Peterson, him and Kyle Schwarber are extremely comparable. Both guys hit from the left side of the plate. Both guys have much more success against right-handed pitching than they do left-handed pitching. Their averages were both right around the 230 mark for their career. Hit for a bit more power. Of course, Peterson, he's shown off during the home run derby a couple of times, so a sweet swing from the left side, but left-handers tend to get him out and give him trouble, which is why he only found 1 year out there on the market. And Schwarber got 10 from the Nationals, and the Cubs ended up saving $3 million going to Peterson. So the Cubbies, again, trying to stay competitive, not going full blow-up mode, to be determined here with the Cardinals moves. But I do like the addition of Jock Peterson to the Cubs for 1 year and $7 million. I mean, there's not a lot of risk there in regards to a commitment. So even if he comes in and struggles, he's out of town after a year, and really no harm, no foul when it comes to the Cubbies and their future and trying to progress that way. So Peterson could potentially find success with the Cubs, Wrigley Field, in the outfield, and find himself getting a much larger deal on the market when he returns a year from now. Speaking of the Nationals, they signed catcher Alex Avila to a 1-year contract. The money on that term has not yet been disclosed. Again, these are all according to sources. These have not been officially announced as I share them with you here on the podcast. But, of course, the guys out there in Twitter and in tune with the game, they don't throw it out there unless things have pretty much been confirmed, except for, quote-unquote, pending physicals. So unless nothing health-wise really pops up, these are pretty much set in stone here. So the Nationals add Avila behind the dish as they continue to round out their roster in hopes to pursue returning to the top of the National League East and winning a World Series once again. A few other low-level signings, the last two to talk about here. We have left-handed relief pitcher Aaron Loup signing with the New York Mets for a 1-year contract. His money value has not been disclosed yet, but the Mets have made moves offensively and in the rotation. We'll get to an additional move they made down below in regards to a trade here in just a second. But Aaron Loup, a left-hander who's found success mainly against left-handed hitters in his past, more of a lefty specialist. But those are, certainly a good currency to have in Major League Baseball, so Loup could find the matchup deal, and in the National League East, there's no shortage of lefties. I mean, you go down the list, the Braves, top one, right off the top of my head, Freddie Freeman. The Phillies got Bryce Harper, Didi Gregorius back. Who else here? Let's see. The Nationals, Juan Soto. So, right there it is. Freeman, Soto, and Harper. Loup certainly going to have matchups against those guys late in games, and you do have the 3-batter minimum rule, but again, he could come in and face those guys and certainly find success. The last signing here to discuss was right-handed pitcher Trevor Williams. He signed with the Chicago Cubs as well. A 1-year, $2.5 million deal for him. So basically, again, you're getting Jock Peterson and Trevor Williams for the same price when you could have had Kyle Schwarber. And I think the value there in Chicago is very much what they're looking for, and adding multiple pieces for that same price tag as they kind of go into that transition into the next era of Cubs baseball. So Williams has had success in the past, mainly with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, Chicago's moved Yu Darvish, a couple other starting rotation pieces. There's rumors of Kyle Hendricks being available via trade, Chris Bryant, those two being packaged together. So they kind of fill that void there with right-hander Trevor Williams going to Chicago. Those are all the signings I have. The big ones to mention, there's quite a few minor league deals being mentioned here, but again, I kind of keep it to the major league level, multiple million-dollar deals. But there was one more trade to discuss here as well, and the New York Mets continue to stay busy. They continue to stay active, and we're going to talk about them once again here in the next segment as to why this trade may have come together. But they traded starting pitcher, left-handed pitcher Steven Matz, to the Toronto Blue Jays. So the Blue Jays adding another starter. They know they need starting pitching in the American League East, or the American League in general. A few scouts not high on Matz have basically said he folds under pressure. He's not a big game guy. And the Mets decided to move on to potentially bring in a couple of other pieces. But the Mets in return got 3 right-handed pitchers. 2 of them, or one of them, kind of a lottery ticket. His name is Sean Reed Foley. He's, not a high prospect, not close to Major League ready, but certainly a kind of a throw-in guy there. Next on the list, they got Yency Diaz, who is their number 26th ranked prospect, or was the Blue Jays' 26th ranked prospect. So a guy with a bit of upside. He's known within the prospect world, but of course not an earth-shattering name or a great piece to get back. And then you have Josh Winkowski, a right-hander, and scouts kind of labeled him as a back-of-the-rotation starter. He's the guy out of the 3 that scouts are most set on reaching the major league level and being able to bring value to a major league team. So if you're New York, you get back a potential back-end starter, a 26th out of 30 ranked prospect, and then a lottery ticket to move on from Steven Matz. I think it's a good deal for the Mets, and then the Blue Jays add a nice piece to the rotation or long reliever or however they want to use Matz. But I think he could help them as well when it comes to the 2021 season. So that'll do it for all the recorded signings, trades, everything that's been out there on the market. We're going to step aside here one last time for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. When we come back, we'll talk to you guys all about rumors, news, notes. A couple of different things happened across Major League Baseball in the last couple of days worth talking about. So we're going to step aside one last time. Check us out on social media, GSMC Baseball Podcast, as well as the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the 4th and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Appreciate you guys listening. Please rate and review the podcast. Check us out on social media. You guys get it out there. I ask you every time, but again, it goes a long way, so I'm just going to continue to pepper you guys with that intel to make sure you're helping us out here. But let's jump in. Rumors, news, notes, what's happening across Major League Baseball here as once again, we're 2.5 weeks away from reported spring training starting. Since we talked about in segment number 2, the players do not fancy pushing back the start of spring training, and they're looking to get compensated for the entirety of the 2021 season here. So a lot going on across Major League Baseball. A lot of it's currently up in the air in regards to the deal, designated hitter, all of that good stuff. But let's dive right in here. Let's talk about it from top to bottom. Let's see. The Toronto Blue Jays, we just said, added Steven Matz. Well, apparently this is not the end of their offseason. They are still looking for a high-leverage relief pitcher in the market. They have interest in Trevor Rosenthal, who is arguably the top remaining free agent pitcher available. They're on the peripheral, the outside looking in on the Trevor Bauer race. People have talked about them as a potential suitor. They're still looking for a number 2 behind Hyun-Jin Ryu in that starting rotation, but his contract demands, Bauer that is, could be a bit too high for the Blue Jays because the Blue Jays were looking into Masahiro Tanaka, but Tanaka actually decided to jump back to Japan. He's going to be returning to the Nippon Giants. I believe that was the team he spent the beginning years of his career with over there. It's a bit difficult to get some numbers in regards to Japanese contracts, but I'm hearing, based on the market, 2 years, just under $10 million, anywhere from $8.5 to $10 million is what Tanaka took. He was looking for 17, 20, 25 here in the States, but it was always known that he wanted to return to Japan to kind of end his career. He had a great success in New York with the Yankees. You know, his time there has to be looked up with a thumbs up. If you're a Yankees fan, yes, he may have sputtered here down the stretch a bit, but overall, I mean, the guy was super successful during his time in the Bronx there. So the Blue Jays were in on him. Kind of on the outside with Bauer, definitely in and having interest on Trevor Rosenthal. And if they can't sign any of these guys, they could continue in the trade market because their outfield is a bit full now with the Springer addition. You have Grichuk and Gurriel, both under contract through 2023. And, you know, Hernandez out there as well if he's DH. So they could look to leverage one of those guys, potentially moving forward to get themselves a starting pitcher somewhere or a relief pitcher. So things could get interesting in Toronto as they continue to wheel and deal and manipulate and basically kind of act like a big market team. I'm a huge fan of the Blue Jays being in this market, talking about it, making moves. And I'm sure you Blue Jays fans listening out there, this is a nice change of pace ever since Marcus Stroman left town and tweeted out that ownership would never build around their current core that they have and would never put a winner out there on the field. All they've done is gone out and spend money, wheel and deal, and it certainly looks like after last year's playoff appearance, they're setting themselves up for more future success here over the next couple of years. Next on the list, we have the Braves and Dodgers potentially being interested in Cruz from Minnesota if the designated hitter role were to come back to the National League. So, of course, Cruz, he's been with the Twins the past couple of years, the ageless wonder. I mean, this guy from the ages of 38 to 40 just continues to crush baseballs, continues to hit the long ball. Nelson Cruz is super impressive. His time with Baltimore and then in Minnesota. I mean, this guy is just a fantastic professional hitter. So if the DH comes to the National League, there are talks that, hey, top teams in the market could look to go all in and potentially that World Series or bust kind of candidacy, and that puts the Dodgers and the Braves at the top of that list. But if the DH is not universal, it certainly has been communicated that the Twins and Cruz have revived their contract negotiations. Nelson wanted to wait and see what's happening with the DH role, but as we continue to get closer to spring training, that deadline comes and things kind of pick up, obviously, with deadline. So Minnesota's president of baseball operations, Derek Falvey, came out and said, talks are, quote, active and productive. And Cruz is just kind of in a holding pattern to see ultimately if his market is going to grow or if he is just pigeonholed into that American League side of things as well. Next, we have a couple of throwing sessions, a couple of bullpens trying to gain some interest. First is Braves right-hander Mike Foltynewicz. He threw a bullpen session at Georgia Tech before the weekend. A lot of teams are showing interest. Apparently, he looked good, according to word coming out of the workout. John Heyman reports that the Mets, Twins, Rays, and White Sox are among teams that have some interest. Previously reported that the Cubs could be out there. According to reports, Foltynewicz was 90 to 92. 29-year-old previously clocked in the upper 90s. But his velocity has faded, and now he's learning kind of how to pitch without that top-end velo, and him in the low to mid-90s could still be effective. But again, it's just a transition into pitch usage, more sliders, curves, using the four quadrants of the strike zone to your advantage, and not just being able to throw the ball by people, but having to learn how to pitch as well. And some people can struggle with it, but Foltynewicz, I certainly think he'll get another shot after being designated for assignment by the Braves last year, whether it's a minor league deal with an invite to spring training or he gets a major league contract. That's to be seen here, but I think we're going to hear that name on a big league roster here this summer moving forward. The other gentleman who recently threw, former Philly Jake Arrieta, apparently looked good during his recent bullpen workout. He's been nagged by injuries the last handful of years. His 3-year, $75 million deal with the Phillies certainly did not pan out. They're super excited to get out of that deal. He ended the last 2 seasons on the injured list. Shoulder issue, hamstring issue. It's not just the arm, but kind of the entire body. But, he's a very hardworking guy, comes in good shape. He's just had some tough luck in Philadelphia, so it'll be interesting to see if anybody jumps on that. I think he's looking at a 1-year type of prove-it deal, and his big money is behind him. But, again, Jake Arrieta was one of the most dominant pitchers on the planet way back in 2016, 2017. I saw a stat. He went 24-1 over the course of 4 months during one season, or over 2 seasons, I think it was. And the only loss was because Cole Hamels and the Phillies threw a no-hitter against Jake Arrieta. So not like he struggled or wasn't any good that day. Just 24-1 over the course, man. So if he can find that again, he's going to certainly be a steal for some guys out there. The Milwaukee Brewers were they still remain high in an asking price for Josh Hader. Remains lofty. Don't waste your time, one executive was quoted as saying. Basically, I reported on last week's episode that, they're listening, but it appears that the asking price is going to be a bit out of the market of what guys are willing to pay. And this is just due to the fact that he signed for 3 more years, or I should say under team control for 3 more seasons. He'll make $6.5 million this year, and then, of course, he'll be due for a raise in arbitration the 2 years after that. But the guy has a 2.54 ERA over 200-plus innings, holding hitters to a 144 average. You can certainly understand why Milwaukee's asking for the moon when it comes to Josh Hader. The LA Angels, they are hiring veteran catchers. Yes, they signed Kurt Suzuki earlier this month, but they've had conversations with the Cubs about Wilson Contreras. They've also talked to the Red Sox about Christian Vasquez, according to Robert Murray out there. They seem to be content with Suzuki and Max Stassi behind the dish, but if they could add Contreras, he has overlap with Joe Madden, of course, and Christian Vasquez is a very good catcher. His price is very high, according to the people coming out of Boston. He's got a 2-year deal here, or a team option for the second year at $7 million. So it certainly makes sense to have a conversation, but if they could get it done, I think they will out in L.A. Because, apparently people are saying they were a top contender for Trevor Bauer, but that doesn't seem to be the case based on kind of the tea leaves I'm reading out there. It certainly seems like the New York Mets are the leader in the clubhouse, and they've offered, reportedly, a short-term deal to Trevor Bauer. And as more stuff's become available, the Blue Jays kind of, relieving themselves from those conversations. The Angels kind of stepping back. It may be the Mets against themselves for Bauer, and he may be looking at a short-term deal. And this is where things get interesting, because if the Mets are offering him a short-term deal, all of a sudden the Dodgers could be back in play, or the Padres, or somebody saying, hey, if you're getting 2 and 60 from the Mets, just come to us for 1 and 40 and try to win a World Series out in L.A. And I don't think that's out of the world of possibility here. So Bauer's case is very, very interesting, because I don't think he's going to get that 5-7 year contract, $200-300 million that he's looking for, and that could bring other teams into play as that term length starts to decrease. Year after year here, or week after week, I should say, moving forward. But what other rumors do we have? Let's see here. Checking my notes. Yadier Molina back to the Cardinals. Like I mentioned, we were going to touch on it. Adam Wainwright's back. They added Nolan Arenado. MajorLeagueBaseball.com, John Paul Morrissey basically says that Yadier Molina is expected to agree to a 1-year deal after the completion of the upcoming Caribbean Series, if not sooner. St. Louis has made a 1-year offer to Molina. He's likely to sign soon. He's suiting up for Puerto Rico's Criollos de Cabos Club for the Caribbean Series, or Caribbean Series, however you say it out there. That begins on Sunday, today. So it looks like after, or I guess yesterday, if you're listening to this on Monday. And he could re-sign with the Cardinals not long after that here. But one last name, Adam Frazier for the Pirates. He could be the next Pirate traded out of town. They've already shipped Talion to the Yankees, Musgrove to the Padres, Bell to the Nationals, and Adam Frazier could be next on the list. So primarily a second baseman, plays some outfield, 29 years old. He could be the next guy that's shipped out of town and potentially moved for some prospects here. Justin Turner looks like he's headed back to the Dodgers. There were terms that he could potentially be having a one-year deal in Toronto, but then they signed Marcus Semien, so it certainly seems that the Dodgers, along with the Brewers, are the only two options for Turner. And like we said, he wants to play for a winner in a World Series, so it seems as if the Dodgers are really his only option there. But that does it for rumors across Major League Baseball. There are a few other reports here I want to talk to you guys about, kind of outside players and acquisitions. Well, a Mickey Mantle baseball card, let's see, 1952 Topps card, T-O-P-P-S. You guys out there in the baseball card world know what's up. It sold for a world record $1,605,150 at auction over the weekend. So a Mickey Mantle 1952 card went for just over $1.6 million at an auction. The rookie card has just 14 higher-rated counterparts in existence. So basically, this is the 15th rated Mickey Mantle card that is available out there. Bidding started at $125,000 and went all the way to over just $1.6 million. So for those of you still into trading cards, still into baseball cards, Mickey Mantle, if you got one of those out there sitting in the basement or your grandpa's got one in his attic, make sure you take a look at it, because even if it ain't ranked 15th and it's ranked 30th, that still is going to be worth a good amount of chunk of change there moving forward. And then lastly, here to wrap up today's show, Ken Griffey Jr. has been named a commissioner's senior advisor. So the kid, the say, hey, kid, that was Willie Mays, but in my era, it was Ken Griffey Jr. They just went with the kid. He's back, senior advisor to Commissioner Rob Manfred. He's going to help out Major League Baseball in a number of areas, special emphasis on baseball operations and youth baseball development. He's also going to be involved in improving diversity at the amateur levels. He'll be an MLB ambassador at youth baseball, special events such as the All-Star Game, the postseason. And, the kid was one of the most electric guys, one of the first ones to wear the hat backwards, one of the first guys in my life to basically make baseball cool. And this is the role that they're trying to put him in. And he's got a great message to the kids out there, basically saying, I don't care if you're big, small, fat, short, skinny, whatever it is. I mean, you got 5'9", 5'9" Hall of Famers, 6'6" Hall of Famers. If you can play, you can play. And that's the beauty of baseball. So my guy brought swag to the game before swag was a thing in the 90s. And with kind of the dying fanship of baseball, I think this is a great move for Major League Baseball, bringing the kid in, Griffey Jr. He'll be able to relate, and just the aura about him is absolutely fantastic. So hopefully he can continue to grow support in baseball amongst the youth out there, amongst millennials, bringing them back to the park. But that's a great move for baseball, bringing Griffey Jr. back into the fold and having him involved. So that does it for today's episode. Another fantastic episode in the books here. One last time, like, rate, subscribe, review, all that good stuff wherever you're listening. Check us out on social media, please, out there, both the podcast network as well as the baseball podcast. And then share us with one of your friends. Send a text, hey, copy link in Apple Podcasts, hit those three little dots. It'll say share link, share episode. Then you hit the message button, send it to somebody who's interested in baseball. Have them check this out. That goes a long way for helping us continue to grow, spread the word, and spread the love that is baseball here in 2021. But Nolan Arenado to the Cardinals, that was the big deal in segment number 1. Let's see, the players are going to reject the latest proposal from the owners in segment number 2. And then, of course, we talked about all the signings and rumors happening across baseball in segments 3 and 4. But that does it. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic week out there. Stay safe again if you're in the Northeast. If you're somewhere else enjoying the weather, I envy you. I'm jealous because I'm just looking outside waiting for when I'm going to have to shovel here. But that does it. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, I'll talk to you guys again on Thursday. Have a great week, everybody.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.